One of my favorites, man, and I think we actually even said it on the show here recently when we were talking about the dog collar match between FTR and the Briscoes. Jay Briscoe died in a car accident on Tuesday night. He was driving his kids. I don't know the details of the story, and I'll be honest, I don't really want to get into them. I just know that he's gone. And we loved him dearly. You know, was never a big Ring of Honor watcher, but every time I did watch the act, the act that caught my attention the most, that always resonated with me, the act that I enjoyed watching the most was the Briscoe brothers. And Jay was the leader of that team. Jay was, every time Jay spoke, every time he was in the ring, I always thought like that's a bad motherfucker. Like I know this is all stupid. This is all, grab ass or whatever it is. But I think that guy could actually hurt you. Like he had that kind of credibility with me just as a viewer, and I know exactly what I'm watching. It just felt like if that was a guy on the street, he would kick my ass. And honestly, that's probably pretty true. Um, but he was just one of the greatest that there ever was. And we talked about it earlier on the audio show, because of those awful tweets that he made, it hindered the rest of his career. And despite the fact that he repented time and time again, that he was forgiven time and time again, there are so many people in this world who are incapable of grace and mercy. But I guarantee you, the moment that they want it, they'll be the biggest ones to ask for it, and they'll be crying and begging. And they won't handle it as half as good as he did whenever he went and repented, whenever he asked for grace, and whenever he asked for another chance. They won't handle it as well as he did. Um, there are still some people out there that never gave him a shot, but you know what? Guess what? They didn't give him a shot. He never went to WWE, and that's fine. The Briscoes got that farm there. He was able to raise his kids. He was able to be with his kids. He was able to be a football coach and a community leader there in Delaware, in his hometown. I think it's called Laurel, Delaware, right? Mm-hmm. So as we're learning more and more about the man Jay Briscoe, the more and more I'm gonna miss him as a wrestling fan.
I've talked extensively that I always was more of a Ring of Honor fan than a TNA fan.
Yeah.
It's funny. I just you look back at the Facebook memories, and I think I shared it last week that it was 9 years ago last week that I stumbled upon Raw and kind of reignited my fandom. And it didn't take very long for me to get tired of WWE because I don't really like it all that much. And I found Ring of Honor. Right. And immediately, because I remember the Briscoes when they were young, but I didn't get to see them grow up. Right. Yeah. I saw them when they were the young guys in ROH. And then I checked out for a while. And when I came back, Jay Briscoe grew up. Right. And he turned into one of the most intimidating looking men in professional wrestling. He had these eyes that when he would cut a promo, even when it was hilarious, which it often was hilarious, would like burn with intensity. Yeah. Right. And there was no one that was a better promo than Jay Briscoe. Right. There was just, and him and Mark had this great dichotomy between them. Like Jay would just do his tangents and Mark would be like the drummer in the background, just accenting it perfectly when it needed it. Like Mark,
he was Ringo in the back.
Totally.
And much like Ringo, he would say goofy, funny stuff in the back too.
he knew how to accent his brother. He knew how to play off his brother and just make it work 10 times better. And I often think about Jay Briscoe as the epitome of what happened to the professional wrestling business in 2002, right? When WCW and ECW contracted, this big void was open, TNA or ROH sprung up. We talk about it. Jay Briscoe was a damn good professional wrestler who most fans didn't know who he was until the last year, unless you were a Ring of Honor fan, unless you watched New Japan, right? But this guy's always been good. If WCW had survived, the Briscoes would have made their way to WCW. If ECW had survived, Paul Heyman would have been all over those guys.
Absolutely.
Like, and it's the tragedy. People are like, oh, he never got a shot in WWE. Let's be real. Mark and Jay Briscoe represent everything that Vince McMahon hates. They're unabashedly Southern, right? They are the people that Vince can't stand the most. They are people who would not do well reading dialogue, who don't need it, right? They didn't need WWE, which they don't like those people. And I get sick when I think of the Orlando Jordans and the QAnon idiot in Florida, Matt Morgan and all those guys that had opportunities when the Briscoes didn't have anything from them,
Yeah.
right? But at the same time, they would have been a joke. Vince would
Hmm.
have heard their voices and he would have made them a comedy act, and they probably would have done good, but
They'd have been the Bushwhackers.
they would have been the Bushwhackers.
Yeah.
And like, here's what I find great about them. If you were to describe Mark and Jay Briscoe to your 2022 typical internet wrestling fan, they would hate them.
Yeah.
Unabashedly Southern, draped in the for most of their career, draped in the stars and bars, super religious, right? Yet everybody loved them. They were able to transcend stereotypes. They were able to transcend people's people's preconceived notions of what people from that part of the world are, right? And a lot of it has to do with the kind of men that Mark is and that Jay was, right?
Hmm.
Like, Mark Briscoe's career was sidetracked because of what his brother said, but that team never went anywhere, right? Mark never bitched about the stupid stuff his brother said, right? Like, they were just brothers, like what brothers should be. Like, again, you think about what they were, and people should hate them, but everybody loved Jay Briscoe. Everybody, and it's just you don't see it very often, you know.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's like, because I think a lot of people, the internet wrestling fan, they kind of represent like a certain segment of the population, and they're probably all voting the same way, right? Like, I would say in large part, and they're really out. Some of them, a small minority of them, really, gotcha type people. They really can't see the other side of a conversation. They're not really interested in anybody else's belief systems and things like that. But what the
It,
Briscoes, I think what Briscoes represented was that they are like, if you're, no matter what side of the aisle, what side you vote on, no matter what your beliefs are, I think everybody could like the Briscoes regardless. And from what I gather, just from the outpouring of love and support they've gotten from their colleagues, it didn't matter where they came from, where their background.
Mhm.
And Briscoes treated you the same, and they loved you no matter what. And they always had your back. And that's why so many people have come out and have their back.
I agree with you. I think that the internet wrestling fan, of which we are members, they're
Yeah.
oftentimes very judgmental and they don't like to have their views challenged. I will
Hmm.
discuss this later. To challenge someone's views is akin to attacking their persona, and people get really personal about it, right?
Yeah.
Perhaps I'm a little guilty of that myself. So, but I mean, like I said, our good buddy from WWE, my friendship with him started because we had a little online debate that started a little contentious, and then we had a good talk. And it's like he was like, "Hey, you're cool." I'm like, "Yeah, you're cool too." And so we became friends. There's not
Yeah.
enough of that. There's not enough Jay Briscoes in the world. There's not enough people who hear somebody else's point of view and say, maybe I need to rethink this, right?
Hmm.
And I think that we could stand, because I mean, if all your friends look, act, and think the same way, you're really living in a bubble and you're sheltering yourself, right?
Yeah. You're
Right.
never going to grow. You're never
No,
going to improve, if you
no.
don't experience people that are different than you and accept them, even if it's people that you disagree with, even
Oh
if
yeah.
it's, you know what I mean? Like, say if you're a hipster from San Francisco, you should really befriend kind of a redneck religious guy from the South and get to know what they're about, and maybe let them get to know what you're about. And instead of attacking them for their beliefs and stuff like that, maybe just get to know them and understand their beliefs and where they come from.
Being part of two different online communities has been really awkward for me because they're too different. The amateur
Yeah.
wrestling community is vastly different from the professional wrestling online community, like polar opposites.
Yeah.
And it's oftentimes I find myself kind of caught in the middle, even though I tend to politically agree more with the pro wrestling side of things. I have tons of friends and family and people that I love on that other side that I think can be absolutely stupid about stuff.
Same.
But I'm like, I go, God, you're freaking dumb. But they think, oh, JD's that wacky liberal, blah blah blah, and they'll laugh at me, and I do the same thing for them. I'm like,
Yeah.
you know, I don't think I don't think enough people are willing to hear from somebody else and willing to reconsider their positions. You don't have to change all the time when you're challenged, but it's good to hear a challenge and like
Hmm.
listen to it and reevaluate it. And Jay Briscoe, someone from I don't know if you heard the WL today, but Separate View talked about Sussex County and how people from that part of the world like oftentimes don't leave their communities and they are kind of sheltered. And
Hmm.
pro wrestling was able to let those two experience a different world. And that when your worldview is challenged, it's a good thing. It's a good thing
Yeah.
to have your perceptions challenged and to rethink things. Not enough people are willing to do that. And not enough
Yeah.
people are willing to stand up when their beliefs are challenged. Like when someone says you're wrong, they immediately just go, "Well, I'm not going to engage with you. I'm going to run away and not talk
Yeah.
to you," which is
Or I'm going to hide
disappointing.
behind a pseudonym online and I'm going to attack your entire
Or
character.
throw a block at you,
Yeah.
like it's I stuff like that disappoints me because how does anyone learn? How does anyone get better? How do we share conversation? Like I don't like conversation should be uncomfortable and tricky sometimes, and not enough people are willing to engage in conversation sometimes.
I always, kind of after the stuff come
I just
out.
I
I'm
just got
sorry.
a great I'm sorry, I just got a great text from my
Oh,
friend John Muse that was perfectly timed. Sorry. Go ahead.
okay. Okay. So I identified with Jay Briscoe a lot because he comes from Sussex County, Delaware, and that's a certain type of community. I come from a trailer house in the Central Valley, California, a very, very red, like bleeding red district in California. And when people think California, they think that the entire state's blue. That couldn't be further from the truth. We have so many agricultural and blue collar rural areas that kind of think a certain way. And so the things that he said on Twitter, right, was those are normal words to me growing up where I'm from, right? And so it wasn't until I got a little bit older and then I joined the military that I started to learn about all these different people. And I had to learn how to work with all these different people and learn their likes and dislikes and learn about their culture and learn how to. And then now I'm in a leadership position. So I'm having to learn about all these different people and accept all these different types of people. And it was uncomfortable at first because I didn't know that, right? I had to learn that and I had to grow into that. And I have so much respect for him,
Mhm.
not because of what he said, but because of how he handled it afterwards and the way he did go about apologizing and going out of his way
Being
to stick
real
his
about
and be real about it. And just say,
Yeah.
man, I was just ignorant, right? And that's what it was. He was just straight ignorant. He probably didn't know anybody that had that lifestyle, and he'd been taught a certain way his entire life up until that moment. And then when he sent those awful tweets, I get the feeling he learned that he had a lot of people in his inner circle that he didn't know about that had that same that had the lifestyle that he was just insulting, right? And then it probably opened his mind and something clicked in his head. Not everybody is born woke, right? Not everybody's born accepted. You're born into this world, and then you're taught things from not only your parents but from your surroundings and the people that you grew up with, and then you have a lot of bad habits you carry with you into adulthood. Now it's your duty once you become adult that when you're called out on those things to learn and grow. And I feel like he did. And it's a goddamn shame that he didn't get to have the career that I think that he should have had. But you know what? Like I've said that, and I'm glad that he stayed in Ring of Honor as long as he did. I wish that he would have went to AEW, right? In Ring of Honor's dying days. I wish, and that's what really upsets me. I'm glad he never went to WWE because he'd have been a bushwhacker, right? I don't think TNA was the place for him either. I think Ring of Honor was the perfect place for them. And then when AEW sprung up, I thought AEW would have been the perfect place for the Briscoes. But you had that issue there with Warner Media, and they just couldn't get over it. And that was my big disappointment. And I just remember last year when Tony Khan bought Ring of Honor, and when I found out that they weren't bringing in the Briscoes, I went on the Boom podcast with our friend James McDaniel, and I just went on a rant, basically saying the same things that I'm saying now. You got quite possibly the greatest tag team in the world and one of the greatest of all time. And this guy said this stuff, and I don't want to rehash it all. And you're not even willing to have a conversation with the guy. I bet that Warner Media guy that blocked it didn't even call Jay Briscoe to ask him
No.
what his life is like now, right? Didn't even ask his friends, well, what's this guy really like, right? All he knows is that there was those two tweets that he sent out years and years ago, and he said that's the entirety of this man's character. Who he was 10 years ago, he must still be the same, and I'm not willing to go out of my way to discover that, right? And that's the thing that sucks about this whole situation. and I'm just brokenhearted for him, and I'm broken. You know what? I'm mainly brokenhearted for the family. They lost, they lost Jamin Pugh. They lost a great man, a great wrestler, a great father. You see the videos online of him and his girls, and you see the Facebook posts, and I'm honestly glad that, we didn't have a podcast Tuesday. I might not have been able to do it because just as a husband and a father, I have a little girl myself, and I probably would not have been able to do the show without crying a bunch. So, I was quite emotional over the whole thing because, we said it here several times. The Briscoes, they are my favorites, and they're always going to be one of my favorites. I'm always going to cherish the 3-match series with FTR, especially the dog collar match that closed out the series. I thought it was the best of the three, and it's, one of my favorite matches of all time, man.
I think that as both of us, we're roughly the same age. We grew up in the '90s when certain language was a lot more prevalent and acceptable than it is now, and both of us have had to change things that we thought were acceptable
Yeah.
to better ourselves today. And I see a lot of that. I saw a lot of that in Jay Briscoe, and Tony Khan wanted him on the show. He's talked about it. Because why wouldn't you want the Briscoes?
Right.
Right? Anyone who watched Ring of Honor will tell you how great these guys are and have been for a long time. And it
Yeah.
is a damn shame. But like I said, I was after practice. So Andy and I went to Chipotle after practice to get dinner, which is what we kind of our thing on Tuesdays. And I opened up the Observer site and I saw that Jay Briscoe was dead. And I had to drive home, the half-hour drive from DeKalb back to my house with my son, and I was like in the corner of my mind, like, it's always a fear that you never know with cars and stuff like that. It's scary, man. It's
Yeah.
scary.